Welcome back to the channel, guys. Thanks for stopping by again. For those of you who are new here, my name is Ethan, and I can guarantee you will not regret clicking on this video. But in today's episode, it is not your typical EJC episode, as nothing really goes wrong. And as a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite, as everything goes just according to plan. And I must say, this is probably one of the best days of my life, and a day I know I'm never going to forget. But before I show you guys any of the footage, I should probably give you guys a bit of background behind why this day was so special for me. So in South Australia, we have a lobster season with two zones. The Southern Zone, which opens on the 1st of October, and the Northern Zone, which opens on the 1st of November. And for those of you who have been following this channel for a while, you would have noticed and seen that last summer, Daniel and I found a spot in the Northern Zone, which held some monster crayfish. So I'll roll on some footage from last season, and hopefully gets you guys excited for what's about to come. So the last time I dove that spot, I actually got this monster 3.8 kilo cray, and ever since then, I've just been dying to head back and dive it again. And all off season, I was just counting down the days till November, and I plan to dive the spot no matter what the conditions were. So fast forward 9 months later, and November had finally come, and I was keener than ever. And what makes things even better was 5 days prior to this dive, I'd actually caught this big 3.6 kilo crayfish back in episode 59, so I was still on a massive high from that. Anyway, I planned to dive the spot with Wayne Knight, as unfortunately Daniel couldn't make it. So we headed down to the spot and planned to crash there the night before and get up early the next morning and dive all day. But when we arrived at the spot, the water was looking real nice, and I was honestly just contemplating whether I should just hop in straight away and check it out, but I knew that I had to be patient because we had the whole of tomorrow to dive it. So we set up our swags on the beach, had some dinner, and then headed off to bed. Well, Wayne headed off to bed. I couldn't sleep one bit, and all I could think about was just checking what was underneath that ledge out there. So I was on my phone for a few hours just playing Candy Crush, but then eventually managed to doze off and fall asleep for a couple hours. But was then soon wide awake, and I checked what the time was, and it was only 1 a.m. And I knew at that stage that there was no way I was going to be able to fall back asleep. So I lay there for 4 hours playing Candy Crush, listening to the ocean, and then finally my alarm went off. And I immediately unzipped my swag and hopped out and was greeted by a beautiful sunrise and some awesome diving conditions. And at this stage, I couldn't wait any longer. And this is probably the most excited I'd ever been to hop in the water and dive. So we quickly had breakfast and then hopped straight in the water. And I immediately gunned it to the ledge. And by gunned it, I just put my head down, kicked as hard as I could, and I was just so focused on getting out there that I didn't even notice that my float boat had flipped behind me, and my drop weight and torch had both fallen out. And on a normal day, I would have gone back and looked for them, but today wasn't a normal day at all. So after a long swim, I finally made it to the ledge. And by that time, I was completely out of breath. Nonetheless, I turned on my GoPro and did a short breathe up before descending down to check what was hiding in that ledge. And what do you know? There was an absolute beast of a lobster just sitting there. Of course, I immediately called over Wayne and he came to have a look.
Wayne! Wayne! There's a big cray! You see it? That's a monster!
After that, I headed down again to have another look and figure out the best way of getting it out. I decided I'd have a crack grabbing it with my hands, as I could see that it didn't have that much space to back up into. So even if I did mess it up, it didn't really have anywhere to go. So I did my breathe up, and the rest is history. And just like that, it was all over and done with. 9 months of anticipation, 9 months of build up, all over within a couple of minutes. But it was all so worth it. And I may or may not have gone back to the spot and checked this ledge since this day. So if you want to find out if I did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, about half an hour went by before Wayne found a nice little honey hole with about 8 or 9 crays in it.
Well, what are you waiting for?
But before we had a crack at any of those, one of the funniest things happened to me. So, when it comes to diving, my biggest fear isn't sharks, it isn't drowning, but it's rather having to take a poo in the water.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Yep, you heard that correctly, a poo in the water. Oh man, especially when shore diving, as compared to boat diving, you can at least go on the boat and sort of hang off the edge and do your business. But shore diving is just a whole nother level, and it's not fun at all, especially with long johns on. Means I got to take off the whole top in order to go. So I always try and make myself go before I dive. And I did this morning, but it must have been something that Wayne had fed me the night before, because just after I caught my big cray, I really started feeling the urge to go. But I tried to ignore it and kept on diving, but it was just getting worse and worse, and in the end, I just couldn't hold it in any longer. So thank God there was a rock I could scamper up onto to do my business, but as I was rushing to put all my gear down, my GoPro somehow managed to turn on without me realizing and recorded everything. So I had a bit of a surprise when I was looking back through the footage, and unfortunately I can't show you all the footage of what happened, as I don't want to lose all my subscribers and be banned from YouTube forever, but I can tell you it wasn't pleasant at all. Don't go over there!
Disgusting!
Just had to take the biggest crap of my life, man. And that's the worst thing about long johns, is you gotta take off the top as well if you need to go, but if you're gonna go, you gotta go. Oh man. So after I got that all done and out of the way with, I was feeling amazing and at least 5 kilos lighter than before, but I was ready to dive again. So Wayne headed down and I followed him, but the ledge was pretty tight and awkward, so I couldn't really get in there to film. But I waited on the outside eagerly to see what he would pull out, and he didn't disappoint. He went down again, and this time managed to snare himself a nice big one, but it wasn't coming out without a fight. And for those of you wondering, yes, snares are legal here in South Australia. So while Wayne was doing his breathe up, I dove down and had a bit of a play trying to catch a boarfish, which had been hanging around all morning. And for those of you who have eaten boarfish before, you would know that they are absolutely delicious and one of my favourite fish to eat. And I'm pretty sure this is the exact same boarfish that was hanging around at this spot the last time I was there, back in episode 34.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
So Wayne had gone back down to get his final crate of the day, as the daily bag limit in South Australia is 4. So now it's my turn to head down and have a crack at the rest. But Wayne had actually pushed all the lobsters over to the left, which meant I could then use the other entrance and didn't have to go upside down to access them. So I'd already set up the snare and torch on the ledge, and all that was left for me was to just go down and get it. And as I was pulling it out, the end of the snare got caught in another ledge behind me, but luckily I managed to free it up and land it. After that, I went down to get the other one out, but as I was trying to get the snare around its horn, I accidentally touched its antenna with the snare, so it backed up even further. This meant I had to go through the other entrance and go upside down, which I was really trying to avoid, as I knew my hand would then be blocking the camera's view. But what's happening is I'm obviously trying to slowly get the snare around the base of its horn without touching it, as the crayfish was already heaps skittish. I eventually managed to get the snare around its horn and pull it out. And once again, the end of the snare gets caught. And in the heat of the moment, I don't even think to try and see what it's caught on, but rather, I'm just trying to pull it out. And with all the struggling going on, it unfortunately comes off. And it's so frustrating watching this footage back, as in hindsight, I reckon I could have easily landed this cray.
I had it. Oh.
So after that dive, I was exhausted and just puffed out as I'd really tried to push myself in order to get that cray out. And in hindsight, that was really dangerous what happened, as I could have easily just blacked out and drowned, as unfortunately Wayne couldn't watch me because he had just lost the snorkel. And I know it's so easy for me to try and push my breath hold, whether it's trying to get a cray out or waiting at the bottom for a fish to come in the shooting range. And it's just something that I know myself and a lot of other divers really need to be conscious about, as it's just so easy to not think about it. And I just know I got to constantly remind myself that no fish or crayfish is worth my life. But by the time the swell and wind had really started picking up, and it was best that we probably called it a day and headed in before anything could go wrong. So I dove down to grab my torch, which was still in the ledge. But as I was down there, I may have gotten a little bit distracted, as I managed to spot a couple more crays in a different ledge.
I couldn't get my torch, so I got something else.
The cray had a really soft shell, which meant it had just molted or was about to molt, so I decided to let it go to live another day.
So I hope you can hear me, but it's pretty windy. The wind picked up a lot, and so is the swell. So we're going to head back in now. I ended up with two nice sized ones again. I'll give you guys a quick look. In there.
Put it over you, stretched over your body.
It doesn't come alive then.
That looks quite seductive, actually. There's the face of a happy boy. Oh.
So when I got home that night, I immediately grabbed out the scales and weighed the cray to see if it cracked the 4 kilo mark. And guess what? It did. It came in at exactly 4.01 kilos. So I barely scraped through, but hey, it was 4 kilos. So yeah, that was just such an unreal and crazy moment for me, no pun intended, as I've only been diving for just a year and a bit. So to be able to catch something like this is just so awesome. And I know there's only been 3 other Spearos in South Australia who have recorded catching a crayfish 4 kilos or more since the state record set back in 1986, which was 5 kilos. And those are Shane with a 4.035 kilo cray, Dave with a 4.15 kilo, and of course Daniel with his monster 4.33 kilo cray. And now me, just scraping in over the 4 kilo mark. I don't know if you guys noticed in those photos, but there's one thing that we all have in common, and that is we all caught our crayfish wearing a Trelly wetsuit. So hopefully that's enough to convince you to go out and buy one. And most of the gear I use is from Trelly, and I really rate the quality of their products. And I haven't had any issues or problems yet with them. So if you're looking to get any gear, head over and check them out and show them some support. But to end this video, I thought I'd share an interesting fact about these Southern Rock Lobsters. So researchers found that their size isn't always a good indication of their age, as their size often relates to the availability of their food, the size of the ledge or hole that they're living in, and just other environmental factors. And what's even more crazy is that this 4 kilo cray is technically not even that big, as research has found that these Southern Rock Lobsters can grow in excess of 10 kilograms, which is honestly just huge. Like the carapace would literally be this size. So it's now on Daniel and I's bucket list to go out and try and find and catch a 5 kilo cray. And at this rate, I reckon we might, as I recently found some new ground which is shown to hold some big crays. And for those of you wondering, what have I done with the big lobster? Well, it's currently at the shops getting its meat extracted, and then it's going to get taxidermied and turned into a full-size crayfish model. Unlike these carapaces, they really don't show the full size of how big these crays actually were, as they don't have its tail or legs. So hopefully when that model comes in, I'll mount it on the wall behind me and you guys will be able to see it for yourselves. But thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please, leave a like, comment down below. I always look through all the comments and try my best to reply. And it actually really does make a difference, especially for me, as lately I've been pretty lazy and pretty unmotivated to get out content, but I'm hoping after I upload this video, I started to feel a bit more motivated. So please do that and stay tuned, because I've got a ton of footage I filmed all over this summer, just waiting to be edited. And next week's episode, well, probably not next week's, but the next episode is another really crazy one and involves a big Wobbegong shark. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace! I took the biggest poo ever!